Pay attention to the next time someone asks them how they are doing. They will answer. They will answer correctly, in the right tone, with the right words. They will ask how you are doing in return. They will seem present. They will seem fine. But somewhere underneath that performance, something is running constantly that does not stop. A low, steady background process that monitors everything: the room, the dynamic, the subtle shifts in other people's energy, what is expected of them in this moment, what they might be failing to provide, whether the version of themselves currently on display is the right version for this particular situation. They're exhausting themselves being around other people, and most of the time, nobody can tell, but then they get in the car alone, they close the door, and the sounds of the outside world compress and soften behind the glass. And something happens that does not happen anywhere else in their life. The monitoring slows, the performance stops, the constant calculation of what is needed from them in this moment goes quiet. And for the first time in hours, possibly the first time all day, they can simply exist without managing how that existence lands on someone else. They are not relaxing, they are recovering. And the fact that the moving vehicle at 60 miles an hour is the place where they feel most safe, most themselves, most free, is not a quirk. It is a signal. And what it is signaling about the interior life of a person who feels this way is something worth understanding completely. Start with what is actually happening neurologically in that moment the door closes. And the human nervous system is in a near constant state of social monitoring when other people are present. This is not a choice. It is biology. Humans are social animals whose survival across hundreds of thousands of years depended on accurate reading of group dynamics, on knowing where they stood, on detecting threat and approval and shifting allegiance before those shifts became dangerous. The brain evolved an entire system for this, running in parallel with conscious thought, continuously scanning the social environment for information that might matter. For most people, this system operates in the background at a manageable level. For some people, it runs louder, more consuming, more difficult to quiet. The reasons vary. Some were raised in environments where reading the room was not optional but necessary, that where the emotional weather of the people around them was genuinely unpredictable, and the ability to detect a shift before it became a problem was a survival skill, not a social nicety. Some learned early that their needs were safest when invisible, that the space they took up required justification, that being around other people meant being perpetually slightly accountable for how those people felt. These people did not choose to be wired this way. The wiring happened to them, and it runs whether they want it to or not. Now understand what the car removes. When a person is alone in a moving vehicle, something rare and almost structurally unique occurs. They are simultaneously completely private and completely purposeful. There is no one to monitor, no dynamic to read, no version of themselves to manage or maintain or adjust. But they are not idle either. The car requires just enough attention, the road, the speed, the other vehicles, to occupy the part of the brain that would otherwise spiral. Not so much attention that it becomes demanding, just enough to keep the mind anchored in the present without forcing it to perform in it. Psychologists have a name for the mental state this produces. They call it transient hypofrontality. During repetitive, moderately demanding physical activity, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for self-monitoring, social evaluation, rumination, and the exhausting work of managing one's own presentation, partially quiets. The person does not stop thinking. They start thinking differently, more fluidly, less self-critically, with a kind of access to their own interior that the social world, with its constant demands and feedback, does not easily allow. This is why the drive home from a difficult day feels different from any other part of that day. It is not just the absence of the office or the meeting or the difficult conversation. It is the presence of a specific neurological state that the car uniquely, reliably produces. Here is the dimension that makes this genuinely dark. The people who feel safest alone in a car are often the people who are most skilled at not appearing to need it. They have learned, usually across a long time, to be functional in social environments. to be warm, engaged, present, even enjoyable company. The performance is so practiced it no longer feels like performance from the outside. Sometimes it no longer feels like performance from the inside, and they have forgotten where the act ends and they begin. The car is where they remember. Behind the wheel alone, no audience, no expectations, no one whose reaction requires management. They encounter something that can feel almost unfamiliar after a long enough time in constant company. Themselves, not the version shaped by what other people need, not the version calibrated for the room, the unmanaged version, the one that thinks things it would never say, that feels things it would never show, that does not need to justify its mood or its silence or its particular way of moving through the world. For some people, this encounter is peaceful. For others, it is briefly disorienting, like entering a room you have not been in for a long time and noticing everything that changed while you were away. And there is a specific subset of this experience that almost never gets named directly. Some people do not just prefer driving alone. They need it, not as a preference, but as a maintenance requirement. Without regular access to that unmonitored space, something in them begins to accumulate. The social performances layer on top of each other without resolution. The monitoring runs without rest. The distance between the performed self and the actual self grows until it becomes a kind of dissociation, a background feeling of being slightly disconnected from their own experience, of watching their life from a short distance rather than living it from inside. The drive alone does not solve this, but it interrupts it. It creates a gap in the performance where something real can surface, breathe, and settle, where the person can spend 20 minutes or an hour being answerable to nothing and no one, where the question of what is needed from them right now has a simple, uncomplicated answer. Just drive. That is all. Just drive. And that simplicity, in a life organized almost entirely around the needs and perceptions of other people, is not a small thing. It is, for some people, the only thing that keeps the accumulated weight of constant social performance from becoming unbearable. Most people who know these individuals do not know this about them. They see someone who seems capable, engaged, socially fluent, someone who handles things, someone who is, by most visible measures, completely fine. They do not see the calculation behind the calm. They do not see the monitoring behind the presence. They do not see what it costs. And they do not see the drive home, the one taken the long way on purpose, the one where no music plays or where one specific song plays on repeat without apology, the one where the route chosen is not the fastest but the emptiest, where the destination is not the point and was never the point. The point was the 20 minutes between one version of themselves and the next, between the self that the world requires and the self that requires nothing from anyone, between the performance and the person underneath it. If you recognize this, if somewhere in this description you found your own commute, your own long way home, your own instinct to stay in the parked car a few minutes longer before going inside, understand something clearly. That drive is not avoidance. That drive is the only honest conversation you have with yourself all day. And the fact that you need it is not a weakness. It is the most accurate thing about you.